Hello, guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Impact Players podcast. My name is Warren Maynard. I am the host of the podcast and the national director for Impact Players, an organization focused on inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. Today, we are in for a treat as we have Peter Stadeli of Sta-Built Pavers, who will be joining us. Peter is a dynamic young man who has an incredible story as a young entrepreneur turned successful businessman. And you are absolutely going to love hearing his story and his sights as a 28-year-old navigating a successful business, marriage, and family, the highs, the lows, the ups and the downs, and everything in between. But again, thank you for joining us. And Peter, thank you for being a part of this show with us.
Hey, Warren, thanks so much for having me on the Impact podcast. I'm happy to be here.
Well, just as a little background, you and I met through LinkedIn and got connected, had a phone call. I ended up watching a video of another podcast television show that featured you and your business and your story. And after I watched that, I thought, man, I absolutely need to get to know this guy and hear his story a little bit more clearly. And one thing that stood out to me about your story was just the way that you were so intentional along the way. You really worked very hard, but you also worked smart. And in your story, you shared how, as a Christian, that helped guide you as a businessman as well. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit about that. But let's back up. And again, based on what I know about your story, as a 16, 17-year-old, you got started working, doing some hands-on outdoor work that ended up becoming the first step in a long line of steps towards building this successful business that you've created. Now, tell us a little bit about what happened and how you ended up launching Sta-Built Pavers.
Yeah, well, it's probably not everyone that they do what they started when you're 16 and 17 as a summer job turns into a business. But for me, that's really what it was. I needed money. The simple solution is I needed money as a 16-year-old. I had things I wanted to do, things I wanted to buy. And so I got a job working for a friend of mine at 16 years old. And he did outdoor, pavers, landscaping, a lot of mowing and stuff like that. So I worked for him as a summer job. And I really fell in love with it as something that so hard. And just seeing the transformation of what we were able to do. By the time I turned 18 years old, he wanted to move into something else, into a different career. And so that kind of then opened the opportunity. Now what am I going to do? Right. So I incorporated with the help of my dad and my mom, started my own business. And from there, just, one block at a time, grew this business to where I am now, 10 years later, almost 10 years later, and running a successful, but also I'd say very normal business where there's the ups and the downs. It's not all what a video can stitch together and make it sound like there's a very real side to every business.
Yeah. So let's go back to that 18-year-old moment where you went from being an employee, just a hardworking young man moving stones from one place to another, to now saying, I want to start a business. I want to become a business owner at 18 years old. That's not a normal jump for a lot of guys. Most young men would say, okay, I'm going to go and look for another job, or I'm going to, hit the books and go to school and get a real job and work my way up in a company. So what was it about you and the way that you were wired, maybe anything that was happening in your life personally or spiritually. I have no idea. But like, why on earth did you think the next step for you was to start a paver company as an 18-year-old?
Well, yeah, well, I think maybe I could back up a little bit and say that there's a couple things that my personality that probably lend to that being a decision of mine, or a decision that I really pushed hard for. One of them, I was 18 years old. I was young and naive. I didn't realize what owning a business was really like and what it all involved. And so I think not knowing what was in store for me made me think, oversimplify it and make it sound a lot easier than it probably really was. I would say secondly, I was born to be dyslexic, and in doing so, I guess I feel like maybe growing up, looking back, I feel like I had a chip on my shoulder of something I needed to prove. I need to show that I could do just as good or better than any other 17 or 18-year-old person like myself. And then I guess the opportunity of my friend, I probably didn't have any thoughts of actually owning my own business until he decided to move out, and I wanted to keep doing the exact same thing. And so kind of the combination of all those pieces said, yes, I can do this. I want to do this, and I love what I do. I guess, having a passion for what I do, having a passion for that job, and combining those together made me really want to do this. Yeah.
I love that. And I didn't know that you had dyslexia in your background. I actually do too. So automatically I'm relating to those feelings of, hey, maybe I'm not the best at school, but I'm not an idiot. I know I have something that I can bring to the table, and that desire to want to prove that I think is a powerful one, especially for a young man. And a lot of times young men get a bad rap because they have a lot more confidence than they do sense, a lot of times. But sometimes that bravado is exactly what is needed in a situation to get somebody off the couch and into the game to really get started. So you had that bravado, you had that chip on your shoulder, you had that hunger and passion. How did you transform the fire into something that actually could produce an income and be successful?
Yeah. And if I maybe back up one second, and when you were talking there, made me think of, I think a lot of people might look back and say, everybody comes from different backgrounds, and they might think that, maybe I was at an advantage. And in many ways, I was at an advantage, right? Foundationally, I grew up in a solid home. I had good parents. I grew up in a solid school. There's a lot of things that, that help build you to where you have a solid foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has a starting point somewhere, and nobody's starting point is equal. It's a bunch of different levels and planes. And I think for myself, there's people that were more advantaged than me or less advantaged, but taking what we do have and building from there. That's something, I guess, looking back, I think anybody listening, anybody watching should know that there's never going to be where you can say that now this is a spot, this is the perfect timing for me to launch out. Sometimes it is just going out there and doing. I guess to answer your question, I started out very small. So the initial investment into what I was doing didn't cost a lot of money. It wasn't like I was needing to raise capital. I had a little bit of a savings account. And so, with that was able to buy some small equipment, my own pickup truck, an old truck as it was. And then I'd rent equipment, as needed per job, and so it was really boots on the ground, getting one customer, doing and making them so happy, surprising them in the way of seeing a young guy out there willing to do. I was definitely undercutting the market price to help get me these jobs, but that helped me get more jobs. They would tell me to their neighbors, and where we are as a business now, we're very specialized. What we do, we're very much doing, pavers, retaining walls, synthetic turf, outdoor living spaces, right? When I started, I was of the mindset I would do anything to keep my business going. I didn't want to be at home. It didn't look good. I'm sure my mom would ask me, what's up? Maybe you should go get a real job. So in turn, I just took on, I remember picking up dog poop for people. I remember pulling weeds in neighbors' yards, or just doing things that were nowhere near my ideal dream job, but I did it to get me to that, where I wanted to go. I knew where I wanted to be.
So you knew where you wanted to be, and as a result, you were willing to do what it takes to get to that space. So let's go ahead and just fast forward to right now, 10 years later. You're 28 years old. Give us an update on the business first, and then I want to circle back and talk a little bit about your family and your marriage. So where's the business at now, 10 years later?
Yeah, well, I guess, 10 years later, we've definitely grown quite a bit since then. We still, 10 years later, we're still facing problems that we haven't faced before. This year, think about it, it's a different economy than it was last year or the year prior. And I would say we have more people working for us. There's there's over 30 people that we have spread across 3 different locations. We work with subcontractors, and so we probably have anywhere from 60 to 70 additional subcontractor employees working on any given day. So there's a lot that's being managed, which means there's a lot of people problems, a lot of challenges that we face on a daily basis, and just the amount of customers we're dealing with. So, some people from the outside might think, man, you're such a smooth oil run business. The inner workings of it are really dynamic from a day-to-day basis. And it truly feels like there's always wind in our sails in regards to the challenges we're facing on a daily basis.
Yeah. So let's go back. You told me before we jumped on, you've been married for almost 5 years now. You got married in 2019. So, walk through a little bit of what that has been like for you from a entrepreneurial standpoint to say, okay, in those early years of starting the business, it's like I would do whatever it takes for however long it takes, and I would outwork the competition. And then you get married. Now there's a new layer of responsibility. There's a new necessity for communication. There's a new, person that you're trying to care for emotionally in addition to yourself. So, what has that been like to transition from single entrepreneur to married entrepreneur over the last 5 years?
Yeah, and I guess, God knows all things, and he has that right path for every person to go. And I even think of the journey of me meeting my wife, my best friend, my wife, and that journey, very unlikely circumstance of how I met my wife. I actually met her I'm from Washington, right? And she's from North Carolina. We met in New York at a at a memorial for the World's Trade Center. It was over 9/11 at a kind of a Bible conference deal, and had only a couple days. I talked to her a couple times, and we made a connection. And here we are, almost 5 years later, we're married.
Wow.
And the transition really from me by myself, I guess, running my business. The shots were called myself. I didn't have to communicate to another person about we're going to be buying this or we're doing that or this happened. There was quite, I guess, an adjustment. I'll just put it that way, because it wasn't something I was used to doing. And I guess that finding that right balance of communicating enough of the day-to-day stuff, but not over communicating to the point where the work she's to take care of my wife is she doesn't have a career. She works at home. She takes care of our family. And I don't want it to be a thing where it overburdens her with the stresses of the day to day, but I also want her to know what I'm dealing with or what I'm going through. And so I guess that in some regards took some adjustments getting to where that is a balance. And I expect that's probably for any business, whether it was started before or after the marriage. And then I guess another interesting thing that I guess I noticed about us as a family, once I guess I did a lot more rash moves before we got married, where let's go dump some money into this and experiment and see how this works. And sometimes those worked out to be big wins, and other times it was a complete failure and a complete loss. But it didn't really affect anybody except myself for the most part. After I got married, I guess I started thinking in slightly different terms, and maybe didn't ever get some of those massive big wins, but we also didn't get a lot of those big losses with the stability that I guess my wife brought into my life, and helped me to think in a little more of those terms. Yeah.
That's an interesting insight that I hadn't really thought about, but like, yeah, the financial risk level for a businessman, once he's caring for a family and thinking about the mortgage and, you know, college educations and things like that, you start going,
Yeah.
should I risk this? It could
Yeah.
be a big payoff, or it could be a big risk. And, you know, now I'm looking at my wife or my wife and children, and the process of decision making is a little different than it was before.
Yeah, probably one of the things that I guess you talked about challenges, and I guess maybe this is real, right? And you have work that's very pressing and very it comes at you like it needs to be answered right now. And I guess it's trying to find the balance of taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of at work on work time, to being available and being attentive to our home and our home life, and the I guess as the spiritual leader of our home, being actually that person. And that's I guess balance is a noun and a verb. In my life, it seems like it's always a verb. I'm having to always find that balance.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And I think that touches on something that I wanted to kind of ask you about, and that is like, so, you know, when you started out, I'm assuming that if you needed to work 5 16-hour days in a row, like you would do it, because you're like, I'm single, I've got nothing else to do, I'm passionate about this business, I'm going to do whatever it takes, I'm going to get the job done. But you know, when you get married, and then especially when you become a father, you know, you use the word available. Part of the journey of a young entrepreneur is learning how to really negotiate those tensions of what does it take to be successful at work versus what does it take to be successful as a husband and father. So, like, were there some moments where that, you know, that really got tested, or was there some sort of a way that you found yourself going, okay, I'm changing the way that I do things now because of the life stage that I'm in?
Yeah, 100%, Warren. So I know before I was married, I would early to work, you know, and I would come home late at night. I worked Mondays through Saturdays, and Sundays was my day off, and I pretty much went to church, and then after that crashed.
Yeah.
And that pretty much was my lifestyle. After I got married, one of the first moves was Saturdays are now a day I'm at home. That's just a non-negotiable. Unless there's, you know, I can probably think on a couple hands that I've had to go in and do something, but those were for something we both talked about and understood. It wasn't a planned, yes, I'm gonna be gone working this day. The other piece of that is I try, and again, we talk about balance. I try to be home for dinner with my wife, or if I'm not home for dinner with my wife, be around the next morning for breakfast then. And it's just spending time, being there with my family. I don't ever want to I'm very passionate about what I do for work. I'm also very passionate about what I do in my home, and I don't want to ever get to the point where I'm trading one for the other. And I guess if you look at them, somebody used the term balls, bouncy balls, and figure out which of the bouncy balls you can drop. Because some of those bouncy balls, if you drop them, they will bounce back. Home, for example, is more like a glass ball. Your home life is like a glass ball. If you drop it, it's going to shatter. It's not going to bounce back. Whereas my work life, certain things, those are bouncy balls that I can drop every now and again. If you always drop them, eventually they quit bouncing too. But, kind of get the idea of where you got to prioritize.
That's so good. That's so good. So now as a dad, tell us a little bit about kind of your three kids, what that journey has been like, and what are your kind of hopes for your family and for yourself as a dad? Like, how do you envision yourself as a dad of, the kids that God's given you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, our oldest girl is almost 3 years old, and her name's Shiloh, and she's a real live wire. She loves to hang out with me, whatever I do. We live on like 11 acres, and so if I'm on the tractor doing something, she's always going to run out there and spend time with me. She's really good that way. A daddy's girl, you might say. Yeah. And then we had another a girl. Her name was we named her Selah Promise. She was a stillborn, and we named her Selah because Selah in the Bible means to reflect, to pause and reflect. And we named her that because every time we think of her, we want to pause and reflect on God's promises. Selah Promise is her name. And then July 4th, which is only then a little while ago here, we had our first boy born. His name's Isaiah Courage, and obviously very excited. He's so small, right? But I'm always very excited. It's so special. But yeah, when it comes to our family, I guess my wife and I are both very much passionate about people and helping others and being a part of something that gives us purpose, not just doing things for trading a monetary value or something that makes us just look good in the eyes of everyone else. And I guess I hope for our family that as we as a family can do that for our community, for our neighbors. And I think it's really amazing and special. Our neighbors, we moved recently to where we are now, and our neighbors have started to come organically. And just over time, more and more, just stop in and visit us. And it's something we really love and appreciate. It takes an investment of time to build that up. And we want our family, our children to see that, because I think at the end of our lives, we look back and if I look back, I don't want it to be, I built this nest egg of X amount of dollars to pass on to my children. I want to build up a nest egg of memories, a nest egg of values that we were able to pass along. And that I learned from my parents, and from my friends and people like yourself. And that's, those are the things I want to pass along to my children and to the community, people that we relate to.
I love it. That's what we call being an impact player, for sure. And I think, it's exciting to see a young man who has enough perspective at this point in his life to see that, hey, chasing after the career dream as the greatest thing of all is it's not a winning formula. If you win at work and lose at home, you end up losing. And so to know that you're striving to be a great husband, a great father, a great leader, and that, all that we have is a gift from God, that every good gift and every perfect gift comes down from the Father of heavenly lights. And so let me transition a little bit then to your faith, because you've mentioned it a few times. You've talked about God and church, growing up and having certain values instilled in you. So share a little bit about your faith journey and how it's kind of informed much of what you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, I guess growing up in a Christian home with parents that were a dad and mom of faith, I think I can take that for granted, and how I got to where I am. But I believe every person, regardless of if they were, for myself, if I was born with Christian parents or not, you come to a point where you have to choose to accept that faith, embrace that faith, and move on. And I remember very vividly when I gave my heart to God. Maybe at that time I didn't understand everything when I made that choice, but it was baby steps along the way. And I spoke earlier, or said earlier, where God puts everything in a person's life for a reason. And I think, just as a young man, I dealt with pride in a very, very real way. And while I was dyslexic, I wanted to outprove everyone else, because it was pride that I wanted to show everyone else that I was better. Me thinking me better than other people, even though maybe I was less than anyone else, and I think God has led many, many things into my life, even now, and He has many more things planned, I'm sure, or He's going to allow to help guide that faith journey. And more importantly, I think I have come more recently to the realization of the purpose for my life is I want to be able to help share anything that I have to other people, to help them find purpose in their life and hopefully draw people to God. At work, one of the most important things is we have all different types of people working for the company. And it's been such a joy to me to multiple people have given their lives to Christ since they've come to work for me. And I definitely will, what does Paul say? One man watereth, another man fertilizes, next man in God, but it's God that gives the increase, and I think maybe we were a little seed along that way. And I think that brings so much happiness. And recently I joined up with a group to help out with, a billboard ministry. When people call in, they need people on the other end to be a mentor to some of these people that want a journey. And those are things that really, really bring purpose to me personally. And everybody has those things that bring them purpose, but it has to be more than money. The money stuff has to be taken care of. That's, you got to take care of your family financially. But when those things are taken care of, you can't always be pursuing those things for happiness. You will not be happy in the end if that's all you chase.
Yeah. Wow. I love that passion for purpose and for mission, being on mission with God, even as you work. I think a lot of times, you talked about the money. A lot of times Christian business owners feel like the only thing that they can do with their business success is to give money. And certainly there's great value in that, but to create a culture within your business where people might feel led to come to Christ, I mean, that's a mission field right there. That's a ministry right there. And then to think about, how can I create a life and a business that allows the kingdom, the things of God to move forward in other people's lives in a relational way. I think that's absolutely what every business leader needs to be thinking about is, yeah, we want to seed our finances in God's, fields, but I love what Paul says when he says, not only did I give you the gospel, but we gave our very lives with you as well. And so
Yeah.
when people can see your life, and they can see the way that you lead your family, and they can see the way that you invest in your church and those kind of things, it can transform everything else that you do. So I'm wondering, maybe kind of we'll wrap this up, but share a little bit of, if you could put your arm around the shoulders of a young man or a group of young men, and just kind of say, hey, here's some things that I've learned in this first decade of business leadership and family and marriage. What are some takeaways? We like to call them in Impact Players nuggets. What are some nuggets that you would say, hold on to these truths, because they can really change things for you?
Well, that's setting the bar pretty high there, Warren. But I guess if there would be a couple things, I maybe have three that come to my mind that I could maybe share, that maybe they more relate to my life. And so it's not that I have everything figured out, but maybe three things that that happened in my life that maybe someone could relate to. And the first one I would say is, for me, I thought success was what really would make me happy in the end. Being successful. If I achieved this level, we got to this point, then that's what I'm really searching for. What I think I found out was having purpose and knowing where that purpose comes from in my own life is what makes me genuinely happy. So that's maybe something more for me. The other piece that I've tried to live in my family life, our family life, and in business is never never risking more than I truly have. And sometimes, I guess, to illustrate that, you feel like there's such a big win here. Maybe it's to open up this, or to start, and you dump everything into that. But if it goes, you lose a lot more than just what you put into it. And so I guess for myself, being, more the entrepreneur type, reminding myself never to be risking more than I'm willing to lose. And I guess the last one is, and it definitely relates to me, is I have a habit of making decisions too fast. And so I have this quote that I heard: slow down the big decisions, speed up the small. And the reason why that's important to me is I can overanalyze something that should take a minute or two to figure out. But then when it goes to buying a big purchase item, making a spontaneous purchase, and that can relate to home, family, whatever. And so those are maybe three things that I would give as way of saying, here's your nugget.
I love it. So with Impact Players, we have what we call a bacon guarantee, that if you come to one of our Impact breakfasts and you don't walk away with at least one nugget, that will give you a year's worth of bacon. So we have gotten more than enough nuggets today to cover that guarantee. Peter, this has been so great. How can people follow you or get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you, your business, and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. And so if you want to reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, Peter Stadeli, on LinkedIn. And my name is spelled Stadeli. That's my last name. And you connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll find a way to work together, or at least talk and chat. And I love working with people. So.
Well, I hope that for whoever's listening to this podcast, that they are encouraged today. If there are young men, and I've got some young men that I'm going to, specifically send this podcast to. If there are young men listening to this, I hope that you'll learn some things from Peter's story that might, give you a picture of what you want to do as you move forward in your life. If you're an older guy like me, or even older than that, I hope that today is encouraging to you to know that that there are young men like Peter that are out there doing this thing the right way, trying to fight the right fight, run the right race, and to be impact players for their families. But wherever you are, thank you for being a part of the Impact Players community. You can always find out more about Impact Players by visiting us at impactplayers.org. And if you are inspired and encouraged by today's podcast, please share it with others, like, subscribe, and rate and review. We would appreciate that to help us get our word out to more and more guys. And for all of our guys out there, thank you for joining us. Peter, thank you for being a part of this podcast. And we hope we'll get a chance to see you again soon.
All right, blessings to you.